In the Back of the Book segment tonight, we continue our reporting on how to deal with the Iranian regime. You may remember the Iranian hostage crisis of 1979. Barry Rosen was one of the 52 Americans held captive for 444 days by supporters of the Ayatollah. Today, the Iranian regime sometimes tries to put on a more moderate face compared to back then, but Rosen says no American voter should be fooled. I spoke to him last week. Mr. Rosen, so you say the Iranians always win when we negotiate, when the United States negotiates with Iran. Explain that, please.
Well, almost 40 years ago, I was taken hostage with 51 of my colleagues. And at that time, we were victims of Iran and the Iranian Revolution. And the Carter administration, of course, lost out on that one. Again, and over the years, it seems, even during the Reagan administration, Iran-Contra, and now also at this juncture in Iranian-American history, we see that there is a quid pro quo for hostages and payments.
Well, wasn't yours a quid pro quo as well, though? 52 hostages released the same time, $8 billion was turned over,
yes,
released to the Iranians?
Absolutely, it was a quid pro quo. But the Iranians were singing the song most of the time, and they had I would say, control over the situation and the international situation for 14 and a half months.
Do you think they have the same control here? Do you think this was a quid pro quo? By the way, what's the difference if it's quid pro quo and it coincides directly with a hostage release? That's a ransom, though?
Yes, it is. It just sounds better, that's all.
So do you think they did make this negotiation,
yes,
saying, we'll release your people, but we want the 400 million?
Well, you know, look at the situation. An airplane full of money comes into Iran, stacks of euros and so forth, and at the same time, maybe minutes later or whatever, 4 Americans are then returned to the United States. Yeah. It sounds like a quid pro quo, yeah, to me.
Well, I was just saying that it sounds like ransom and quid pro quo.
And ransom.
Tell me, your 444 days in captivity, were you involved? Did you hear about any of the negotiations that were going back and forth, or were you just kept completely separate from it? For
99% of the 444 days, I was incommunicado. I was in Evin prison, like many of the American hostages are, well, now. That prison was what I would say the maximum security prison. We were subjected to terror all the time, attempts at forcing us to say things that we did not want to say, using automatic weapons against our heads. We were terrorized, and those were terrifying moments in my life.
Were you tortured?
If you consider sitting in a cell with the feeling that this could be your last day in your life, yes.
Did they never give you hope? Did they never say we're negotiating and no?
Never. They were absolutely great. Even when the attempted rescue occurred in April, we didn't know a thing.
Tell us about that.
That night, I was taken down from my cell, put into a van. The van was repainted, was tied up hand and foot, transported to the south of Iran, and there I landed up in what I call the black hole, a place that I lived in for 60 days without any light. That's terror to me. Did
they do that when they realized the rescue attempt was being made, or were they tipped off? Did they know it prior to the attempt?
When the rescue attempt occurred, they then activated this event. So they didn't know anything about it at all. The rescue attempt might have succeeded if we didn't have that accident in Tabas.
Now, why do you think, and I only have about 30 seconds, so why do you think that some people would say that because Ronald Reagan was being sworn in and the Iranians were fearful of a Ronald Reagan presidency is the reason why this deal went together at that moment?
I think at that time, the reason why it took place that way is because they wanted Carter to suffer. They wanted that to take place until the ultimate moment of his presidency. So he would never get a victory from Iran.
Even if Carter offered the $8 billion, they wouldn't take it from him?
No.
All right. Barry Rosen, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And remember to check out our podcast, The Contributing Factor. There's a new episode up today with inside information on the controversial $400 million in cash the U.S. sent to the Iranians. You can find that on BillO'Reilly.com or iTunes.